Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to today's session on becoming a best-selling author in 2023. Today, I am very excited. I want to talk about something that I get asked about all the time, and that is the actual writing part. Okay, I know we've talked about, growing your audience. We've talked about branding. We've talked about marketing. We've talked about a lot of things, but we haven't really talked about writing. We've talked about it a bit in terms of messaging, but I know for a lot of people, the writing part can sometimes be the scariest. It's not necessarily being out there in the world, it's getting our thoughts out of our head and onto paper. So, to start with, I just want to share, I'm going to share two quotes today. The first one, we're going to kick it off with. But if you haven't read Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic: Creative Living Beyond Fear, I would highly, highly recommend it. And the first quote I wanted to share from her is, you're not required to save the world with your creativity. Your art not only doesn't have to be original, in other words, it also doesn't have to be important. For example, whenever anyone tells me they want to write a book in order to help other people, I always think, oh, please don't. Please don't try to help me. I mean, it's very kind of you to want to help people, but please don't make that the sole creative motive, because you will feel the weight, and we will feel the weight of your heavy intentions, and it will put a strain upon our souls. So let's break that down a little bit. When it comes to writing your story, we all have a story inside to share. We all have a message to communicate. But when we put the pressure on ourselves to change the world through our writing, it has an impact on our writing, right? It does things like gives us writer's block, right? We don't know how to start. We don't know what to say. We're so stressed about trying to say the right thing to save the world that all of a sudden nothing comes out. We also communicate that in our writing, in that we have that urgency, that need to impact people comes out in our writing, and it can come across as uncomfortable, desperate, needy, all of those things. Don't overthink it. When you are writing, remember, you have a story inside of you, right? And your story will impact people, but not because you try to have it impact people. Your story will impact people because story does, because your lived experience will teach things to people, because the way you communicate will get through to someone in the way no one has ever gotten through to them before. That will all just happen without you trying. There is someone or a group of people out there that need to hear your story your way, but they don't need you to try to write it in a special way. They don't need you to try to help them in your writing for it to do so. Let me go a little bit further. When you put pressure on yourself to achieve grandiose things through your writing, you literally cut off your creativity because there's too much pressure, right? It's now too important. So for myself, I always write my chapters or my books. I write them very last minute. I always have great plans for writing these beautiful, poetic pieces in prose. And so long as I hold that intention of I'm going to impact people, this is going to change the world, I can't write. I sit down, I put my hands there, and I'm like, I have nothing to say. So when the pressure is on and I am now last minute and I have made a commitment, I have to get a chapter in, I have no choice but to just write, the words just come out. Because now the pressure isn't about changing the world, it's about meeting a commitment. And so now I'm okay with writing whatever comes to mind because I just need to hit that deadline. And the things that come out are actually quite beautiful. I mean, they're never what I set out to write, and they're never what I thought I was going to write, but I'm proud of them nonetheless, right? So the first thing to do when you sit down to write anything is to set the intention of writing it for yourself. Write it because you need to get the story out. Write it because it's been living inside of you for so long and you need to share it because that's what it was meant to be. It was meant to be something shared. And then sit down and write what you needed to hear when you were going through something, or what you needed to hear when you started on a journey, or what you needed to hear yesterday. Sit down and write to yourself yesterday, to yourself 5 years ago, to yourself 2 years ago. Don't write to anyone else, write to you. Okay, because when you're writing to yourself, it takes the pressure off. You're telling yourself what you need to hear. I mean, it's therapeutic as well, which is amazing. My first book that I wrote, 10 Things You Need to Know About Small Business Bankruptcy in Canada, real page turner, was actually written as a form of therapy for myself. I needed to get those feelings out of me. I needed to process the events and the occurrences, and I wanted to do it in a way that, might just maybe make one person feel less alone going through a very scary process. I didn't expect it to sell millions of books or change millions of lives. I wanted to write it for myself, and I was hoping that maybe it might help one person. It helped a lot more than one, right? It was released right in the first year of the pandemic, and a lot of people were facing small business bankruptcy, and so it was actually quite impactful, but that wasn't the intention. I wrote it for me. So when you take the pressure off, when you no longer tell yourself you have to change the world with this chapter, the words will start to flow. Now, where do you start? Right? What if you've never done this before? So the way I always start is I think to myself, how do I want the reader to feel when they're done reading? Do I want them to feel inspired? Do I want them to feel encouraged? Do I want them to feel empowered? Do I want them to feel informed? How do I want them to feel? What action do I want them to take? Or feel called to take? Do I want them to, feel called to take up a charge and write a petition? Do I want them to feel called to make a small change in their life? Do I want them to take a minute and appreciate themselves? Right? It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be small. Just how do you want them to feel? What action do you want them to take? And then work backwards, right? So what experiences in your life made you feel that way that you could share? Or what process do you go through to get there? Again, write for yourself. Don't write for someone else. The right people, and I love that I'm using the word right so many times, the right people will hear what you're saying. Okay? So when you are your target audience, trust me, there's a lot of people that feel like you out there. When you are your target audience, you know your target audience intimately. So you know what they need to hear to feel called to do something. So think about it that way. What message do you want to share? How do you want people to feel? What action do you want them to feel called to take at the end? And then work backwards from there. And then when you do, remember the first, 5 lines of your chapter are the most important. Okay. Or your book. You want people to feel drawn in. So make a statement. It's just like marketing. They say hook, story, close, and all that stuff. A chapter is no different. A book is no different. You need to hook them in at the beginning. So your first 3 to 5 lines are the most important because they're going to draw people in. Share the conclusion. Share something monumental. Make a bold statement, right? I mean, I've written a chapter that said, I hate small talk. It makes me feel awkward. And in fact, I'd rather sit in silence. That confuses people, right? A lot of people love small talk. They don't like silence. So when you make a statement like that, they're like, what? And they feel called to read more. Oh, you're welcome. But you can say, it's the end of the world as we know it, right? I read that on Facebook the other day. And it wasn't even talking about like global destruction or anything. It was talking about shifting consciousness, but it was still intriguing. It made me read further. You can use any sort of a statement or a hook or ask a question. Have you ever felt like you've lost your identity in motherhood? I mean, if you're talking to that target market, they're going to say, oh my gosh, yes, I have. And then they're going to want to read more because now they're like, hey, you heard me, you know what I'm thinking. So kind of make a statement at the beginning just to get people drawn in. Remember how you want them to feel at the end, what action you want them to take, and then fill the middle in, but write for yourself. Okay. Don't write to change the world because it's too much pressure. I'm telling you, it's too much pressure and it can be debilitating. The other thing, and this is my last Elizabeth Gilbert quote. Again, read Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert. I want to close with this one. Recognizing that people's reactions don't belong to you is the only sane way to create. If people enjoy what you've created, terrific. If people ignore what you've created, too bad. If people misunderstand what you have created, don't sweat it. And what if people absolutely hate what you've created? Well, if people attack you with savage vitriol and insult your intelligence and malign your motives and drag your good name through the mud, just smile sweetly and suggest as politely as you possibly can that they go make their own fucking art. Then stubbornly continue to make yours. Remember, your writing is yours. It is your creation. It is your contribution. It doesn't matter what everyone else thinks. It doesn't matter if they like your title. It doesn't matter if they like your content. It doesn't matter if they like your message. It's yours. What matters is if you like it. Okay? So tune in again next week. We'll cover some more stuff. If you have any questions, please hit me up in the Facebook group, Inspired and Profitable Mompreneur Community. I am there to answer questions. I'd love to hear your feedback. And as always, remember, the woman you see when you look in the mirror is exactly what a successful entrepreneur looks like. Have a great rest of your day, friends.